welcome to our weekly giving season session. And I'm Kara. I'm fundraising coach at DonorBox. And today I am joined by Kara Schmid, our senior content writer. Kara, will you say hello, please?
Hello, everybody. Super excited to be here and talk about some social media and email.
Well, absolutely. And Kara is my go-to. She's our content specialist here at DonorBox. And she is my go-to when organizations reach out with content questions and strategy questions around communication. So I'm excited about our time together today. And it's really good to see all of you here. Thank you for showing up week after week. Even if this is your first time joining us, you are in for a treat. This is a must-do for year-end fundraising. And Kara has some really great giving season pro tips to talk about that can fit into your year-round communication plan too. So we're talking all about email and social media and how a few good practices can boost your year-end fundraising results. But first, I have a poll question. See if I can do this right. Jenna always does such a fabulous job here. So I have launched a poll for you. I hope you can see it. How many touch points does it take on average before a donor gives? So a touch point would be a communication piece, an email. Basically, how many times does a potential donor need to hear your message before they take action to give? Go ahead and log your results. Oh, we have a clear cut. Oh, no. Let's see. Kara, what's the answer?
Well, thank goodness it's not 20. That would be a lot.
That is a lot.
But so if you've turned in earlier in this series, or you've joined us on Academy, or even if you actually read your giving season session email this week, wink, wink, you should actually know the answer to this one, which I think is why so many of you got it right. So it was a trick question. If you answered B for 7 or C for 12, you're correct. So the real answer, the actual answer is that it takes anywhere from 7 up to 12 touch points on average before a potential donor becomes an actual donor.
And that research has been around since the 1920s, and that marketing research, believe it or not. So that is still holding true almost 100 years later.
Mm-hmm. So you're right, Kara, and that's why it's so important to make sure your fundraising campaign covers multiple angles, audiences, and tactics in what we call a multi-channel fundraising campaign. And if you have been on a call with me before, you know how obsessed I am with these. So buckle up. We're going to talk about them a lot today. This means, so multi-channel fundraising campaigns mean that you need to take your message and spread it out across your direct mail piece, your website, your ads, phone, event scripts, and what we're here to talk about today, of course, is your email campaigns and your social media posts. So I'll start today by sharing my top 3 tips for digital outreach as a whole as part of this multi-channel fundraising campaign. And then I'll move on to share a few extra tips you can apply specifically to email and then to social media. So tip 1, recycle your content, right? So I know you guys are probably saying, Kara, how am I going to find the time to write and produce all of this content in order to make sure my donors see it at least 7, 10, even 12 times without seeing, the same exact thing over and over again? This brings us to tip number 1, recycle and reuse your content. You work so hard to write a perfect appeal letter, those phone scripts, syndicate it across all of your platforms so that you don't have to start from scratch every time. Now, I'm not saying to copy exactly what was said, but that doesn't mean you have to recreate the wheel. Start with your direct mail appeal, typically the longest piece of content you'll write, right, Kara?
Yep.
And pull out those golden nuggets, or that's what I call those best pieces of content, the golden thread message, and weave that into your other outreach. Just make sure that you're adjusting the content for the platform and your audience. Not only does this save you time and some headaches, it also ensures that this message is getting through your audience to your audience more than once and in more than one way. For me, hint, hint, I usually do actually copy and paste and then edit and cut and change away. So I'm not saying you can't copy, but maybe adjust a little bit to each audience.
That is an excellent tip. Thank you.
Thank you. Tip number 2 is to get visual. If you joined us back a few weeks ago in our appeal writing session, you might remember that I mentioned it's often best to leave photos out of your direct mail appeals. That rule does not apply at all to email campaigns and social media posts. In fact, it's the exact opposite. So email and social media are highly visual channels, and a powerful image or an impactful video could make all the difference in whether you get that gift or not. In fact, it's actually proven that Facebook posts that include a photo, a video, a meme, any sort of visual are likely to actually get 2.3 times more engagement than those that only contain text. That's a lot. So this is your chance to really show your impact, not just tell. Do it with imagery of your work, the people you serve, your volunteers, your events, your staff members. Of course, with the permission of everyone involved. And next up, we're at tip number 3. This is probably the very biggest tip I can give you ever. Don't ever forget to include a call to action. Just like in your direct mail appeal, your audience doesn't know what you want them to do unless you tell them. So because we're talking about fundraising campaigns, this call to action for your giving season will likely often be an appeal to give, right? By the way, also make sure you're including that link to that URL to your giving form, especially on email and social media. But there are other call to actions that you could include to kind of mix it up a bit. For example, you could ask your readers to forward an email onto a friend or share a post on social media. Or you could even encourage more engagement on your social posts by, for example, asking people to comment why they give to your organization or what their favorite program of yours is. Just whatever you do, make sure you put a CTA in there somewhere. And when it comes to email, and I'll go over this in a minute, you can and should be putting it in your content more than once.
Okay, quick question here though. Yeah. So if we have a call to action that's a call to action to give, you're asking someone to donate. Do you also put in a call to action for this volunteer engagement or a reshare or something, or do you separate one post is only an ask, one post is only engagement? You know, what do you recommend there?
So on social media, I recommend sticking to one call to action per post. Just because you don't want it to get convoluted. You don't want, them to be like, well, because just as much as you want to tell them what you want them to do, you want to make it clear. So you don't want to be like, oh, you could share our post or you could donate over here, or you got to want to direct them.
Okay.
I've had some experience in emails saying like a quit in the PS or something, being like, if you've already given this year, thank you, please forward this on to a family or friend, a family member or friend.
Okay.
So I think you can maybe mix up a little bit in email, but social media should definitely be just one per post.
Okay. Very cool.
And that brings us to our additional tips specifically for email marketing. So to elaborate a bit more on that call to action and including it more than once in your email, it's actually a good idea to include your call to action 2, maybe 3 times. So in my experience, I've seen good results from first including it in a button, what we call above the fold. So, like in a newspaper, that's before someone unfolds the newspaper. Well, on your mobile device or on your desktop, that's before someone has to scroll on your email. So you want to make sure that first call to action is before they have to move through that email whatsoever. So you can include a button high up in your content, or you can even make the header clickable. You can kind of design a button into your header image. That works as well. And then for your second call to action, I usually like to include a link in the body of the email. And then you can end with that final linked call to action in your PS. So really that PS should sum up, just like with your direct mail letter, it should sum up your email in a sentence or two and tell your reader exactly what you want them to do. So it's really perfect for a call to action. So don't miss it. So the next tip is that I so recommend that you take the time to master your subject lines. This is what gets your email read in the first place, and it's one of the most important elements of any email campaign you send. So make sure you're grabbing attention. A well-placed emoji, but use them sparingly, but a well-placed emoji or two works wonders. And also make sure to keep it short and to the point. About 7 to 8 words max is usually best. The best subject lines also tell the reader what will be in the email, but without giving away the entire story. You want to kind of entice them to open it, but still avoid sounding, too salesy or like you're trying to scare the reader. Urgency is good. False scare tactics, not so good. And I do suggest testing your subject lines over time, just to see what gets every audience is different. So different audiences may respond better to different things. So just test that over time and you'll master it. Also make sure you are personalizing your email. So I mean this in 2 ways. One, make sure you're putting the name of your donor, just like with your direct mail appeal letters. Put that in that email whenever possible, especially in the salutation. And especially because this is email, make sure you're using the first name whenever possible, because email, the tone should be a little more casual. And 2, you can personalize by segmenting your emails so that you can target different groups based on history, giving history, demographics, more. I think you guys have probably heard me use this example before if you've tuned in, but one of my favorites and one of what I think is the easiest segment tactic to do is to find, if you have multiple programs, group your donors based on the program that they typically give to and target them with an impact story about that specific program, a call to action targeted to that program, because they're going to feel a little more likely to give if it's something that they care about and that they care about it. And just like a direct mail appeal, you want your email to sound like it's coming from a trusted friend. So again, that's why you really want to personalize this email. That's why you want to use that name. And again, make it sound like you really know them and you're appealing to them with something they care about.
So Mindy asked, and it goes right along with what you just said here. Awesome. So she says, do you recommend having the logo at the top or removing it to make it feel like a more personal email? What would you recommend?
Ooh, that is a great question, Mindy. So this is going to be one of those things where I say it depends on your audience. But what I've seen, so in this example, you see the Coca-Cola Scholars Foundation. This is a real email. You'll see it went to Kara. But I actually typically like to do a photo in the email header, and then I'll usually put a smaller logo just so they know who it's coming from. They know it's a marketing email. And while you want to sound like you're appealing to them directly and you're friendly, I do think that putting that logo in and within an image or something like that is a good idea.
I think that's good. And I've read some research lately that actually, emails from your personal email account or the director's personal email account often get opened much and have a better, response rate than the standard email from the organization. Right. So if you have some VIP donors, encourage the executive director. You could provide copy if that's not you. You could provide copy and some suggested things and encourage them to reach out to donors personally because it's that personal interaction. So that's a good.
And on that note, going even further is a lot of your like I know MailChimp, Active Campaign that we use, a lot of those email programs allow you to change who it looks like the email's coming from. You can change the name.
Yeah.
So I would do that sparingly. But if you want to send out like your big appeal email, you want to make it look like it's coming from your executive director, you can do that. But again, I would use that, like I would still have your e-newsletter, any news, make that still come from your organization
From the
as a whole,
organization. Yeah.
because you also don't want them to get so used to seeing that executive director name that they stop opening it because they know it's actually a marketing email.
Okay, so switch up who it's from and the style a little bit for better open rates. And then if you are writing, just I guess a pro tip here, if you're writing on behalf of an individual, make sure that they sign off on the content in case you ask them. And because, you want to definitely validate that. So, all right, now social media.
So here's a few additional tips for social media. So first and foremost, short and sweet is usually best here. And I don't just mean on Twitter when you're kept to 280 characters, when they kind of force you into that short and sweet. You don't need to say that short everywhere. You can go quite a bit longer. But what I like to say is, again, it kind of comes to that above the fold idea. Get as much important info as possible before that read more pops up. So and this means whenever, I know Facebook, they don't have a specific set of lines as far as I've been able to see that they've published. But you can test it out and just see if once you get past a certain amount, they'll have that read more, and the user has to click to read more. On Instagram, it's 3 little dots that they have to click to read more. I try to make sure that either the entire post gets in before that, or if not, your most important pieces get in before that read more, or at least make it enticing enough, just like the subject lines, to read more. So just be a little careful about what's going in at that beginning of your post. Because remember, you primarily want people to interact with your posts. So you don't want them just read more or scrolling down because they're like, oh, I don't want to keep reading. It's too long. And that brings me to my next point, which is join the conversation. So this means you want to be sure to engage with your followers. Don't just post. Don't just be nameless and faceless behind the scenes. So ask them questions in your posts, but also be sure to respond to them. Like if they're commenting with a question, I hope you're answering. And you can direct message people from the comment section. So if it's something you think needs a little more personal one-on-one, you can do that. But respond to their comments as well. So I know that not everyone has time to write a note to each comment or each share. Hopefully you're getting enough engagement that you really don't have time to do that. But just doing a like or a heart on comments and shares really shows that you're engaged. And this also means, this is another kind of two-parter, to use hashtags as well as on-trend topics to ensure you are part of that broader conversation. So definitely create a unique hashtag for your campaign that you're using on all your posts, but you also need to use those trending hashtags to make sure your post gets noticed and picked up by our very favorite algorithm. So this is why taking part in hashtag Giving Tuesday is still important. It's a great way to get the word out about your campaign. But that brings me to my next tip, which is to mix up your types of posts. So you should not be asking for donations every single post, right? I know it's tempting, but this will burn out your audience, and it may even cause some of them to unfollow you because they don't want to be bombarded with asks for donations all the time. So instead, sit down, make a list of other types of posts you can come up with. Share stories about your impact, or give a shout out to a major donor or a local community partner or a volunteer. Or did you have a recent event or a program? Just post an update about that. And I like to do even fun like hashtag Throwback Thursday or TGIF or Selfie Sundays, anything like that. That doesn't really, I literally just call them fun posts. They still have to do with your mission because you're sharing images and things like that kind of go with your theme and your topics and your message. but you're taking a step back and you're not asking for anything and other than engagement, really. So you're still joining that conversation with those hashtags. And finally, I want you to stay consistent. So this might seem like it's going against my last one, mix up your post. But what I actually mean is to stay consistent in the amount that you're posting. So I know posting every day may often seem ideal. It's really not feasible for a lot of organizations or teams, especially in the nonprofit world, right? So I want you to pick a number of posts you can make a week and stick to it, even if it's just 3. Or you say, oh, Twitter is easy. I can do 1 tweet a day and then do 3 Instagram posts a week and then do 4 Facebook posts a week, things like that. Just figure out what kind of cadence you can stick to. And on top of that, it is best to spread out your posts throughout the week. Don't just post everything on Monday and say, okay, I'm done. I did my 3 posts. We're good. That's a great way to get lost in the algorithm. Now, there are a few exceptions, such as Giving Tuesday and things like that. But for the most part, you don't want to be just posting everything in one day.
Well, those are very helpful. Thank you, Kara. Oh, one more tip.
Oh, surprise. I almost forgot about this one. That brings me to one last tip before we wrap up and get to our questions. So kind of along the lines of staying consistent and mixing up your posts, make sure you're scheduling as much as you possibly can in advance. There are so many email marketing platforms and social media scheduling tools that are, there's some free ones, there's paid ones, but they still have nonprofit discounts out there that you can use to get ahead of the game. So it's so much easier, trust me, to get as much as you can planned out now so that you aren't rushing to get out that all-important messaging on time. I recommend that you start out by laying out your emails and posts on a calendar or a spreadsheet. This will help you ensure you are covering all of those needed topics, that you have your varied social posts, that you're spacing everything out in regular intervals. I'm a very visual person. That's what has helped me. And because it really shows those gaps too, where you can fill in some things and even use your holidays to fill. I used to fill in my holidays first, those days that I knew I had stuff planned, and then fill in everything else. And then also from there, you can begin drafting content, pull or create your graphics, imagery, videos for each email and post. And even if you can't do this months in advance, set aside time, every Monday. Schedule out your entire week, especially if it's only 3 posts. This way, it's done. You have one less thing to worry about that week.
That's excellent. That is very helpful. All right, our weekly practical action.
Pretty easy to come, not an easy action, but an easy one to decide on this week because the biggest thing that I can suggest for you to take on this week is to start scheduling out your email campaigns and social media posts. Not saying, again, that you have to draft all of your content and find all of your visuals right now, but it's smart to lay out a plan. And we actually have a blog that, Kara, can you drop that in there?
I will.
So there this blog has a little more, thank you, about learning how to plan out a giving season campaign specifically. It starts a few months in advance, so we're definitely further into it, but it still kind of shows you how you can really schedule out your emails and your social media posts for giving season specifically.
And there are a couple questions in the chat, Kara. Let's go ahead and tackle these. Don't have a database that has a lot of home addresses, so a bulk of the year-end campaign is going to be done via email. Do you recommend including pictures with the appeal letters? And Tina, would you just clarify the appeal letter in this case would be an appeal email? Is that correct? And then you will be asking for addresses so you can build your database. What do you think there, Kara?
Yes, email equals pictures.
Okay.
The only time that we recommend not using pictures is in those specific direct mail appeal letters. And I actually would include a photo, and let me know if you disagree, Kara, but in a thank you card that you're talking about sending, that's a great time to include imagery. Email is excellent for it. It really draws interest. So yes, as long as it's email, I say definitely include it in there. And I think asking for addresses is a great secondary call to action. I'm thinking maybe make sure you're focusing on the giving one, the giving call to action, at least at first, and maybe send a second email with a little bit more about the asking for addresses. But
and you can include, you can make sure you include the address information as required information on your giving form too, so that you are collecting that. But yeah. Graham asks, hitting the youngsters on TikTok. What do you think about that, Kara?
I have a love-hate relationship with TikTok. That's why I'm laughing. So TikTok is, I think if you are targeting a younger audience, I think it's definitely a great place to be. It's a great place you can, especially if you can get people like those that you impact involved, or if you have, especially if you have fluffy little animals, if you're an animal charity, those do well on TikTok. To reach those younger audiences. Now, if your target is skews older, I would say, and this is something, another kind of social media tip is I would focus on, especially if you're a smaller nonprofit with a smaller team, find those social media outlets that have your target audience already on there and focus your energy on those. There's no point in, because TikTok videos take a lot of time to film. And while they're great, again, if you're targeting that younger audience, if you're not, you're kind of going to be putting a lot of effort in for probably not a lot of return on investment.
Yeah. We are at the allotted time, but we do have a couple more questions on here. And so I'm happy to hang on for a few more minutes, Kara, if you are. Okay.
Definitely.
Two really great questions coming up here. So the first, Ellen says, do emojis label you as spam? Was told maybe that they would hurt your delivery. What do you think there?
Okay, was told the exclamation points and the question marks.
Yeah, that's what. Okay.
So in my experience, as long as you don't overdo the exclamation points and the question marks, they won't, because we include them in some of ours. They won't hurt you. And actually this is why I recommend like a MailChimp or some email platforms will even read your subject line for you. And I know ActiveCampaign does it as well, and they'll flag it if they think it's a spammy email. So that's a great reason to use a service like that. But emojis, I do not put more than one or two emojis in in a subject line, but no, those don't usually go to spam either.
Oh, that's good to know. I didn't know that. All right. Megan has this question. What is the reasoning behind no pictures in direct mail? And I'm surprised by that. We are both, I think, I'm happy to answer unless you want to take first stab at it.
Sure. I could take first stab, and you can elaborate if you want. So you really want your direct mail pieces to seem like they're coming from a trusted contact or a trusted friend. And when you add too many, or when there's this big image or there's this heavily designed piece, it just feels more like a marketing piece. And you want them to feel like they're talking to a friend instead of a company.
Yeah. And there actually has been a lot of research done on this, and what, receives higher response rates than others. And a standard, simple piece of letterhead with, a hand signature if possible, or if not, a lasered signature in like a blue ink, with bolded text that conveys the message. So the compelling problem that there is, why you're the solution, and how the donor can help. If they can kind of read that through the bold, that responds the best. And it's just that personalization. It makes it seem like it's from person to person instead of organization to person.
We say a lot, people give to people, not organizations. So that that's why you include impact stories, but also that's why it's best to sound like you're a person asking for this help instead of just an organization.
Now, direct mail pieces, sometimes you can include like an insert or a buck slip, and that's totally a great place for a visual if you want to include that there. visuals on follow-up emails. So you're syndicating that content that Kara talked about in your direct mail piece. You're syndicating it into email 1, email 2, social media, however you have that out. Email and social media, tell the story with pictures, totally great. But emails that have, or mailed letters that have photos in them typically just don't respond well. And that's something you can test too. You can take half your database, send them a mailed letter with images and the other half without, and just test it yourself. And maybe that's something that you test in the off season. So in a spring mailing or something like that, if your organization is very dependent on year-end fundraising, might not be the best time to test, and test it maybe in a slower season and just see what would work better for you for next year. Yeah. Tina asks, what's the best way to record donations that come in outside of DonorBox because you want it to show in your goal meter on your DonorBox crowdfunding campaign? And the best answer, I say, is to enter it in as an offline donation on the backside of DonorBox. On that back end, you can click enter offline donation, and it will reflect in that goal meter on your crowdfunding page. And if you have any questions, I'm going to put the support address. It's support@donorbox.org. Can't talk and type at the same time. Don't ever hesitate to reach out to them. 24 hours a day, 5 days a week, super fast response times. And there are 100% genuine people behind that email address, happy to help you. So so glad that you are all here, and hopefully we'll see you next week for an extra special session. See you then.